Hello and welcome back. This is part 2 of my June wrap-up. As I mentioned before, I read way too much this month and talked for way too long when I tried to first film this wrap-up, so I am splitting into 2 parts. I've already posted part 1, so this is everything else that I read this month. Let's get into the books. Starting with mysteries and thrillers, I read The Last Place You Look by Kristen Lepionka, which I received from Minotaur, and I did a separate review of this. If you're not familiar with the plot, this involves a man who was convicted of murdering his girlfriend as well as her parents several years ago. He is now on death row awaiting execution when someone who looks suspiciously like his girlfriend is seen alive, and so the sister of this convicted man hires a private investigator to reopen this case. And the main character is Roxanne, our private investigator, and she is actually a bisexual character, and it's because of this representation that I requested this book. And the short is that I really enjoyed this mystery. I thought it was well written, it was interesting, and the representation, the bisexual main character, was fantastic. I don't normally love romance in books, but she definitely has some different sexual partners, and I just really enjoyed her relationships. I thought it was interesting and liked her as a character. I thought it was just overall a really good story. And my only small complaint was that I did figure out the mystery much earlier than I would have liked to. I figured it out about the halfway point, and I don't think I was supposed to figure it out quite so early. But regardless, the fact that I still enjoyed the book that much despite knowing the ending is always a good sign of a good solid mystery. I also read The Breakdown by B.A. Paris, which I received via NetGalley, and I also did a separate review of this. This involves a woman who is driving home, sees a woman broken down at the side of the road. She considers helping her, but then second guesses herself and continues on. She then finds out the next morning that that woman was murdered the night before, and she may have been the last person to see her alive. And the rest of the book deals with her guilt as she struggles to decide what to do about this, and things really start to unravel. I don't want to say too much more of the plot, but this is a really buzzy thriller that is going to get a lot of attention this summer. And while I did enjoy it, I found it very entertaining. I guess the ending of the book way too early, like not in the middle of the book, but like pretty much at the beginning. So if you're someone who really doesn't like to know the ending of a book and likes to have a psychological thriller that will surprise you, this isn't the best one to pick up. It was, again, enjoyable, but I thought the ending and the whole twist was so obvious. So not my favorite, but still pretty entertaining. Next, I read The Butcher by Jennifer Hillier, which is a really fun and entertaining thriller that involves a serial killer who was running rampant in the Seattle area. The police believe they caught and killed the man who was responsible for the deaths, but as always, things are not as simple as they seem. In the current day, the story is told from a couple different perspectives. One being the chief of police, as well as his grandson and also his grandson's girlfriend. And the girlfriend believes that her mother was killed by the butcher, and so the story is really about her investigating her mother's death, trying to figure out what happens, and the story is just really entertaining. This is not a mystery. From the first chapter, you will find out the identity of the actual butcher, and it's really not meant to be a surprise. Instead, this is one of those fun books that's just about going along for the ride. You get to read parts of the story from that villain's perspective, and it's just absolutely fun. If you're someone who just loves cheering for the bad guys, this is absolutely one to pick up. It was so fantastic. I crushed this book so quickly because it was just super fun, and I just really enjoyed it. It does require some suspension of disbelief. It wasn't perfect for me, but it was still really fun, really entertaining, and I just feel like it was pretty underhyped. I haven't heard anyone else talk about it, and I just think it was a lot of fun. Now, I also read several graphic novels this month, one being Goldie, Vance Volume 2 by Lawson, as well as the Fullmetal Alchemist series. But because I'm reading later volumes in both these series, I really don't want to say too much about it other than I enjoyed both these series, and we'll probably talk about them in some future graphic novel wrap-ups. Now, moving on to nonfiction, I read The Year of No Sugar by Ivo Schaub, which is a memoir about her family's experiences going for a year without eating any sugar. Personally, I'm a big fan of these do something for a year and write a book about it books. Even though, yes, they can be pretty gimmicky, I don't know, the gimmick works on me. I just find them really interesting, and this was definitely the case. I read it as an audiobook, which is a great way to do it, And I just thought it was really honest, just an idea of really trying to find a way to live more healthy. This book talks a lot about sugar as a toxin, which I do think is real. While I do eat a lot of sugar in my diet, I don't think it's very good for you, and there's a lot of science behind it. A lot of people complained about this book because they have a lot of mistakes and slip-ups, and they do cheat a lot and eat sugar throughout the year, but I think it's more honest than anything, because to actually go a year without eating sugar in any form, which is snuck into a lot of products you wouldn't realize, is really hard to do. So I actually appreciate it a lot because I felt like it was actually an authentic attempt by a very average family. And yeah, I just thought it was a good read. If you're interested in picking it up, I say do it. Next, I read Waiting to be Heard by Amanda Knox. And this is her memoir and account of being tried and convicted for killing her roommate in Italy. Before going into this, I knew nothing about the murder case, and I would recommend knowing a little bit about it before reading it yourself, because the book doesn't provide a whole ton of context surrounding the case. The entire book is told from Knox's limited perspective, and because she was largely unaware of the details of the case until she went to trial, you as the reader don't really get the full picture of what happens until you kind of get those details coming out in the later parts of the book. It was interesting. I thought it was just all right. I had a lot of issues with the actual narrative of the memoir. I feel like the book could have been better edited. But if you're a real fan of true crime and you have followed this case in the past, it's definitely would be an interesting read. I just personally wasn't super invested in it, so I didn't have that background of knowing the trial beforehand. Now, I read one more memoir, and that was One Bird's Choice by Iain Reid. If that name sounds familiar, that's because he's the same author who wrote I'm Thinking of Ending Things, which I read the other month, absolutely loved and raved about. You all know how much I love that book. So I found out that he had also written a memoir, so I was very interested in reading it because I really just like his writing. I find he writes short, concise books, and this one was fantastic. I actually included it in my Canadian Reads recommendations video, which I put up pretty recently. But if you haven't heard, this is a memoir about a young man who is trying to find work. He's in his 20s. He ends up moving back home in order to work at a radio station and moves back in with his parents. And this is a super quiet memoir that's really not about a lot of action. Instead, it's really his experiences living with his parents, and it's full of cute anecdotes about their daily life, growing up and living on a farm, dealing with technology, and just those cute little things your parents do, those funny things they say that just make them really adorable and annoying all at the same time. The book feels super Canadian, and especially if you are Canadian or just want to get insight into what small town life is like in Canada, this book rings so true. I really loved it because I recognized a lot of those experiences myself. So definitely recommend it. I just thought it was awesome. And I just love Iain Reid. He has one more memoir, which I'm planning on reading soon because I'm just in love with his writing right now. So that's going to happen. So those are all the books I read in the month of June. As always, let me know if you're planning on picking up any of the books I mentioned. And also share with me what's the best book that you read in the month of June. Hopefully you can add to my own TBR. Thanks for watching. Talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.